So, good morning again to everybody. I'm completely disoriented this morning because there's this bright object in the sky and I have no idea what it is, but it seems to be creating a lot of light. Anyway, I think this is who's counting? Where'd Kathy go? Kathy's gone. Um, how many rainy weekends have we had in a row? Oh, Kathy's coming back. Um, what, Margaret? You've put some fingers up. 10 at least. So to have a glorious sunny day on a weekend is pretty nice.
Um,
Somebody say something.
I did. So I missed the question because I had to get off my Chromebook and get on my phone. So what were we voting on that I missed?
It was a profound question. How many weekends of rain in a row have we had?
14.
14. Margaret
Here anyway.
underestimated. Well, I don't know, maybe that's just in New Hampshire. Maybe we've had 10 here in Maine. But anyway, it's been a long time since the sun shined on a weekend. So, wonderful thing today. So, many of you saw that the Thich Nhat Hanh quote that I sent out earlier in the week. Um, but I'll read it again. The next Buddha will not take the form of a person. The next Buddha will rather take the shape of a community that practices understanding and loving kindness, a community that practices a way of conscious living. This may be the most important thing for Earth's survival. Very interesting. So, in his own way, Thich Nhat Hanh was a controversial figure in the Zen world for a number of reasons. He Thich Nhat Hanh loved walking meditation, um, and if people attended his retreats, spent a lot of time in the outdoors walking. He loved smiling, and he saw smiling as part of the practice. Very in Zen, we don't smile, and yeah, yeah. I oh, and but the thing that he did, I think that most people had difficulty with in the Zen world was that in some point he just empowered all his senior students to teach. Called them together and said, you've all got the Dharma, you know what you're doing, go teach. And that really upset the Zen world because it felt like it was bypassing the transmission process, which I guess it was. And in fact, to such a great extent that the American Zen Teachers Association, AZTA, for example, passed a whole bunch of requirements for membership that they knew would be impossible for Thich Nhat Hanh students to meet, involving koan study, involving attendance of retreats, and so on. I don't understand because there's a lot of Soto Zen people who've never done koan study. But anyway, another question. And anyhow, so he created, so he's got this enormous respect in the world, enormous respect for his peace work, for his work during the Vietnam War, where he sort of repeatedly risked his life. He was actually hated by both sides. Um, and nobody liked somebody who was being a spokesperson for peace. And then he sort of had this, what would, by the standards of Japanese Zen in particular, his his ideas were considered very unorthodox, and yet he was beloved. and still is. And many people around the world follow his teachings. One of the real hallmarks of his teachings, among other things, was simplicity. He didn't have present things in a complex manner, very straightforward, and so many of his books, actually in some ways they're probably some of the best and clearest books for beginners, because he talks very plainly. He doesn't talk in Zenese or whatever we call, you know. So so an interesting figure, an important figure in, I think, the history of Zen here. And this idea has really caught me. This idea that the next Buddha will take the shape of a community that practices understanding and loving kindness, a community that practices a way of conscious living. In part because we are in such distressing times, in part because there are so many things happening right now that are negative, that are destructive, that are frightening. And I think most of us are searching for the medicine for that. What is the medicine for the divisiveness, for the anger, for the hatred, for the racism, for the sexism, for the homophobia, on and on and on, all of these terrible, terrible diseases of the mind that are prevalent right now in many quarters. And what I've started doing, and by the way, this is kind of speculative, in terms of what I'm talking about today, in terms of where I am with it, and so I hope when we get to it, you'll all chime in and share your perspectives. But I kind of connected this in my mind to the quote from Shakyamuni Buddha that I referred to a couple of weeks ago. It may have been just last week, where the Buddha taught at the moment of his enlightenment, and I won't get this quote precise, and it doesn't matter because everybody quotes it differently if I look online, but this idea that I, the great earth, and all beings at this moment realize the way or attain the way, or there's different translations. So this idea that when the Buddha experienced enlightenment, it wasn't his enlightenment. It was the enlightenment of the whole cosmos, in a sense. That in itself is a very radical idea, a very radical understanding. And I struggled to wrap my mind around it. I've struggled with that actually for many years. What does that mean? I, the great earth, and all beings, used to be all sentient beings, but now we say all beings simultaneously attain the way, simultaneously realize the way. What was he pointing to? How could that be true? And yet, from the perspective of the Dharma, we know that it's true because we know that the most fundamental delusion that we have is that of separation. That there's something that was Shakyamuni Buddha that's not Peter Wohl. I know that's hard to believe. But that we are all Shakyamuni Buddha. That we are all realized. That's the implication of that statement. And we look around, we look at ourselves and we go, well, here I am. I'm just this schmuck. I do a lot of stupid things. How could I be the Buddha? How could I be realized? And so that's That's a paradox. That's a conundrum. And yet, right? Buddha, but this has resonated in other places. The idea that we all awaken together, that we all are awakened together. And what the problem is that we don't realize it. Dogen says we practice because we are already awake. We practice because we are already awake. So how can that be? How can we be these ordinary people who do ordinary things and make big mistakes and get lost and confused sometimes? And I won't put forgetful on the list, because none of us are forgetful probably, but I certainly I'm not. But that's saying that we have all these foibles, all these follies, all these aspects to our humanity that are so ordinary. How can we be the Buddha? So we've got that perplexing piece there. And then we talk, Thich Nhat Hanh talking about community, about the future Buddha. Sorry, the future Buddha is Maitreya Buddha, right? That's the story that I forget how many thousands of years after Shakyamuni, Maitreya is supposed to appear, the Buddha of the future. And Thich Nhat Hanh, in his own sort of unique way, is saying, oh, there's no Maitreya that's going to show up as an individual. It's all of us. Oh my God. It's all of us right here, right now. And when we understand, when we experience non-separation, it's absolutely clear. All these barriers, all these, me, not me, you, da-da-da, high, low, all is an illusion manufactured by my brain, by my mind, by all of our minds. And that is not true. And non-separation is the truth. And yet, it's so hard to wrap ourselves around. But as I tie this together with certain other threads, it makes more and more sense to me. And one that makes sense to me, if it's even worthwhile investigation to make sense of it, is this idea of morphogenic fields. This idea that once something is repeated, unless you're in Sedona and you're a skeptic, and you think Peter is off the deep end talking about this, I got him. Anyway, but look, there's many things that are controversial, and but morphic fields is pretty concrete. I mean, chemists measured this phenomena when making crystals. We've talked about this before. The first time a chemist in the lab produces a certain crystal, it takes X period of time. But every time another chemist in another lab anywhere in the world produces that same crystal, it takes X minus whatever. And that continues to progress, so that every time that crystal is produced, it takes less time. And so that concept, to my mind, suggests maybe Buddha opened that field through his realization He opened that possibility, that field, and therefore made it more accessible to all the rest of us. Purely speculative. And then, of course, then there's also the past seven Buddhas. There were allegedly seven Buddhas in the past before Shakyamuni. Who knows where those guys were? What they But is realization, well, not is, it is. Realization is not a property of this little brain, this little body, this thing inside here. It is a property of the cosmos because there is no separation. It's not my realization or your realization. It's the realization of reality looking at itself. It's not a private personal experience. It's the antithesis of that. It's the disillusion of the private personal experience. And our acknowledgement of being, oh God, it's going to come out of my mouth. I'm so scared. Okay. Being one with everything, which is, has to do with the hot dog vendor in New York. Um, but that said, it's the antithesis of individual nature, of separate nature, and it's the experience. It's not an experience. I can't say it. To have an experience, you got to have an experiencer. So as soon as we get into the language, we get into separation, we get into traps. But it's sort of the cosmos experiencing itself in a certain sense. So is this something that happens to me or to you or to any of us? Or is it a much broader transformational process that happens to all of us when it happens to any of us? And therefore, are we as a Sangha, are we as a community realizing the way together? That this is not an individual project, but this is a collective project. And moreover, is this project confined to people who are Zen Buddhists in the Wild Fox Sangha? Is it confined to people who are Zen Buddhists? Is it, can one be a Catholic or a Jew or a Muslim or an atheist or anything else and attain the way? The last couple of days I was away. Elizabeth and I went down to Massachusetts because my friend Keith Lowenstein, who I met at the Parliament of World Religions, was there. He lives in Oregon, but he came east to do a couple of workshops, one in New York and one in Boston. So we got to connect with him before the Boston workshop. And so while we were there, we went to the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. Some of you may or may not know it. It's where a number of the transcendentalists are buried. Emerson and Thoreau and Louisa May Alcott and Nathaniel Hawthorne are all buried in this same cemetery in Concord, Mass. Which is remarkable that these authors were together in this community Talk about community. You know, there were more. Melville was there too. He was just wasn't. I don't know where he was buried, but not there with the others. And so these remarkable people together, community. Were they realizing the way together? Very interesting. And so on the way down, Elizabeth and I were talking, and her original spiritual teacher was Pir Vilayat Khan, who's a Sufi Muslim, very renowned teacher. And Sufi Vilayat, Pir Vilayat Khan was best friends with Rabbi Shachter Shalomi, who's a sort of prophetic Hasidic rabbi, a bit of an eccentric one, but a wonderful one. And so I think they understood that there were no boundaries around this project of realization. Not only those, but many others in that age. I think we were far less compartmentalized in the earlier days of Eastern spirituality coming to this hemisphere. You know, even if we look at our very own Maizumi Roshi, who was good friends with Trungpa Rinpoche, Tibetan teacher. Now, admittedly, they bonded around alcohol and inappropriate sex. Not the most spiritually clear motives. But that said, they had this Tibetan teacher and this Japanese teacher, and they did, you know, I made that kind of crude comment, but they did cross-pollinate in a lot of ways. If you go to the center that Trungpa created in Vermont, Karmacholing, there are aspects of the buildings and the landscape that are Japanese that he got from Maizumi. And the same in practice. Trungpa's lineage does some Zen practices. Oh my God. AI wants me to confirm that I'm speaking English. Sounds like I've switched to a different language. What would we do without AI? Oh, it must be the names. Trungpa. Let's see if I can mess with it. Anyway. So are we all on this journey together? Are we all cross-pollinating? Are we all lifting one another up on the path towards realization? And is that what the path needs to look like going forward? Embracing more and more people from more and more different perspectives who are on this common path, this common journey. I've talked about before about Lex Hickson, whose book Coming Home was one of the kind of seminal texts in my early days of spiritual exploration. And his book, it's a wonderful little book, and he was a grad student in theology at Columbia University at the time he wrote this, which was, I don't know if it's in the late 60s, early 70s, but around that time. And his central thesis was that at the mystical core of all religions, it's the same mountain, it's the same project. We use different language, we have different ways that we participate, but that we're all moving in the same direction, all moving up the same mountain. And he had excerpts from Sufis, Hasidic Jews, the Desert Fathers in Christianity, and so on and so forth, to illustrate this point. As you may know, I've mentioned this before. So Lex Hickson eventually became a student of Bernie Glassman's and lived at um, Greystone Monastery. When Steph and Margaret were there, they were friends and students together. So I think that there was a spirit at that time that we've kind of lost a little bit. There was an understanding of the commonality of the path. And that it was not about our individual realization or enlightenment, but it's a great community project. A great human project. And as Thich Nhat Hanh says, may be necessary for the salvation of our species, preservation of our species. So I know this. I know that I'm rambling, maybe even a little more than usual. But this is something that's just sort of coming into view for me. And what does that mean? What does that mean for us as a sangha? Does it change how we practice in any way? Does it change how we see our practice in any way? And maybe it simply changes our intention. That our intention is to rise together, is to realize together. I mean, that's always been true, but I wonder if that brings it into even greater clarity. And is that something, we tend to talk about that as if it's a discrete event. Someone, they had a Satori, they had a Kensho, they had a big enlightenment. Yeah. And yet, is that something that's happening with all of us all of the time? That's the project that we're embarked on as a community. And how do we as a community enhance and emphasize that, where the goal ultimately is to manifest the compassion and the loving kindness? Okay, enough said for the moment.
I think this is wonderful. And couple of different thoughts. One is bringing it back to even when one of us is meditating ourselves, so to speak, whatever that means, arguably that experience includes including so many voices that this whole idea of all of us being one, even if you're just sitting with, so to speak, yourself, you're seeing the many when you're sitting. So it to me, it feels like describing that when each of us is experiencing our meditation, we are in fact part of the whole. We know that that's true. I'll use the word intellectually, but we approach realization that that is true. But so even we're always experiencing the all, and including the struggles of the all humans that we can recognize so readily. I hope I'm making sense. So even so to me it's incontrovertible that we're each working on, so to speak, the dilemma of the human condition that we are all experiencing. I guess that's a good way of putting it. And the flip side of that is what you're pointing to is that we're the cosmos, that we can we can collapse it into an individual experience, um, or we can expand it. We can expand it when we let go and enlarge. Um, so the next step of that is yes, I really um, resonate with the importance of our realizing that we are evolving together. That's and that is the meaningful thing to um, visualize and aspire to and own as best we can. And so that can translate on a seemingly personal level as supporting each other, and it can translate on a cosmos level as honoring that. And I'm rambling also. How we can support ourselves in our sangha, I think part of that is a intention, I think, as you were saying, um, to honor a shift in focus at the same time. We're working, so to speak, on ourselves, so to speak, and we are honoring that we're all, as they say, in this together. We're all together and we're all, in fact, it. So that's it. But I do want to say, I think it's really important, really important.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a contribution as a participant. I recently saw a comedian, uh, Peter Holmes. He's a very funny, positive comedian. And he said something in a serious conversation with another person that when he looks at people, different people he runs into, he reminds himself, he says to himself, oh, that's the me that sweeps the street over there. That's the me that um, is the police officer. That's the me of anything, any person that he runs into, which keeps present in his mind, that kind of unity field that we're all one, but through forces and interactions and um, we've sort of spun into a kind of a separate not a demonstration, but realization or manifestation, and a lot by happenstance. Like the phrase that for the sake of God go, or the grace of God go I. That people are just born into whatever situation, whatever interactions, and it forms the reflection back to the universe. So it helps to develop my sense when I think about that, my sense of compassion and empathy, especially for people who, at this time, we're very divided, and there's a lot of arguing about positions and stuff like that. But when you think about, that's the me, that's the conservative person, or that's the me, that's the trans person, so it helps me to understand that I am the infinite possibilities of the universe. I am manifesting this way and they are manifesting that way, but we're all just reflections of light, so um, you know, that I shouldn't get too emotional, um, or feel bad or feel angry or anything like that, but to remember that they're me as well as I'm them, and we're all one as who was it? I don't know her name, but we're all just the one big collective consciousness. So that's thank you.
Wow. So this is a very yeah, I'm really liking this discussion. Um I let me talk a minute here. So Gary and Deborah, um you said some things. Um the one you said a number of things, but the thing that really stayed with me was that, as simple as this is, but you said, we are the cosmos. Just that phrase is really something that I am going to keep with me. And Catherine, your description of the comedian and was it the comedian that said this, that when he sees another person, I am the policeman. It so reminds me of a Thich Nhat Hanh poem, I think, that I probably first came in touch with maybe 30 years ago. And it was, some of you may know it, and I don't know it all, but I am the woman being raped. I am the rapist. I am and it goes on and on and on. I am and I forgot about it until you mentioned it. But it really did impact my life. To see, what I think of, to see myself and to see that, you know, I'm endless possibilities. I mean, here, I could be any of those things, and I am those things. So, this has all been very inspiring. Thanks for getting us started, Peter.
My job description, troublemaker.
Thank you all for those comments, which I think is looking at things on a real macro level and also bringing it back to what's in front of us. And Peter, when you said, are we as a community experiencing realization together? And Deborah, I think you said we are evolving together. And I do think that this is happening. And when I thought about how we affect each other, I think one of the things that sticks with me most are the stories that people tell. And that somehow when a couple weeks ago, I think RJ said, well, I remember Kathy told that story about the fish and getting the hook out of its mouth. And I said, oh yeah, I remember a story. And it's, Cal talked about being at a cemetery in his hometown and his farming community. I find the stories that we tell each other kind of around themes such as this stick with me so easily, so much more easily than just a pure concept. Maybe that's the reason koans are important. They're telling little stories also, and it's just easier to put it all in a story. And Peter and I talked about this topic during Daesan this morning. So it caused me to go to a book that I always loved, and it's a compilation of Russian short stories, some of classic Russian short stories, and the lectures that George Saunders, who's an author and also lectures at Syracuse, the lectures that he gave on the stories. And George Saunders also practices Buddhism. So I always appreciate his comments. And he talks about how reading and writing is, when we do that, we feel a connection. And the essence of that is we are ascertaining whether connection is happening and where and why. So the stories lead us to internally seek some kind of connection. And then he talks about, this is asking me to confirm my speaking language too. Sorry, let me cancel that. What he goes on to is that after there was this wonderful flowering of the Russian arts, and he mentions Chekhov and Tolstoy and Pushkin, Dostoevsky, Tchaikovsky, on, and that this was such a beautiful flowering time of civilization. And it was followed by one of the bloodiest, most irrational periods in human history. And I thought about that after, Peter, after you were talking about going to the cemetery to see the tombs of these transcendentalists and novelists and this was a flowering of human thought and wisdom. And yet, it's hard to hold it together for very long, which George Sanders goes on and said, these questions are above my pay grade. So he doesn't answer any of the questions, but it's interesting how we humans evolve. And we seem to be evolving in a way that is connected. And then something happens and we pull apart. I don't know why, but certainly thinking about it and working on it as a Sangha is a way to maintain the connection. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I just want to jump in again. Sure. I just want to tell you how much it kind of tickles me to look up at the screen and see me in so many interesting lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Something that's really interesting, Susan, when you talk about story and we're all here looking at the screens, it's like the Zen dynamic includes the inexpressible in words. So we're humans, we have language, we've evolved to have language, whatever many other species might, etc. But so we have language, but in our Zen, we feel that we're ultimately experiencing something that cannot be subsumed in language. And yet, Susan, interesting, the stories. So we're here as a Sangha, we tell stories. And the stories, using words, have an intimacy and a connectivity, allow a connectivity that sticks with us. So the human and the transcendent. And so helping ourselves as a Sangha um, co-evolve includes story as well as the ineffable. It's kind of weird, but
You know, in spiritual tradition, so many spiritual tradition, the story is the thing. I I had this book in my little library at in my cabinet at Treetop, a story, stories of the spirit, stories of the heart, parables of the spiritual path from around the world. And you know that's what this is. It's a just a collection of stories from I don't know, more than a half a dozen different spiritual traditions, maybe a dozen, and because yes, they do, I think, convey in a way that we can't convey in sort of ordinary narrative fashion. The same is in the recovery movement. What AA, but recovery in general, is all about the story. People get up and tell their stories. And there's something about that, both in the telling and in the hearing, that's powerful, that's transformative. I used to go to AA meetings in the Augusta, Maine area, and there was a gentleman there who referred to himself as Repetitious Leon. And at that time, he had been in recovery for 50 years. And he probably was in his 90s, either late 80s or early 90s already at that time. And he spoke in every meeting, and he told the exact same story, the exact same way, exact same words. So he truly was Repetitious Leon. And in fact, it was the point, after a while, I could tell his story in the exact same words, in the exact same way. And yet there was something that came, the being of this man. He was a beautiful human being. He had tragedy in the sense that living as long as he had, he outsurvived his wife, he outsurvived his daughter. He kind of lost everyone that he loved, and yet he carried on, with telling the story. So it is an interesting thing. And in that AA perspective, our stories are sacred. No matter how mundane we may think our lives are, our story is sacred.
And I was trying to think of a story about why our evolution towards our shared humanity falls apart. And the story that came to me is one I told you a couple weeks ago when I went up to the UU church because I was seeking community, and there was a speaker panel about how can we help the immigrants in our community, and sign me up, yeah, I want to be there. And then they said, okay, now we're going to break down into small groups, start talking to the people next to you. And immediately I recoiled and I didn't want to do it. And I've been thinking, why didn't I? Why was that hard for me? And I think it just takes a little effort to get outside of yourself and be, as Catherine said, the policeman on the corner or the homeless person asking for something. At least for me, I could identify this hesitation that I didn't really want, but I just felt it like, no, leave me alone.
I felt the exact same thing, Susan, when I went to a Standing Together meeting, which is an organization that started in Israel to bring together Israelis and Palestinians. But there are branches here in the United States, and this branch in Burlington had been in existence for a year. So they were still organizing, and they did exactly the same thing. And I had exactly the same reaction. And as soon as I got over that initial recoiling to my hermit person, I am also a hermit. I mean, you're not, but I
yes,
am.
I am.
Yeah. Once getting over that, this was just another person who was there seeking peace, just like, everybody. So, but that initial knee-jerk reaction, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna cut this off here because of time and because we have another thing that we need to attend to. But this is a wonderful discussion. I mean, because to me, this is the gate of loving kindness and compassion, right? We need to open to the other. We need to open to their life, to their possibilities, to their humanity, and so on and so forth, or to the more than human world, to the many beings on this planet that are not in this little human race. Um, so we will revisit this. But I want to shift because, as I think all of you know, our sort of larger sangha, as it were, had a terrible loss this week. Peter Harris's wife Natalie died very precipitously. I don't know the details beyond that. What I was told was that she had just spent some time in Ireland. She has a very good friend over there, and she goes over fairly often, and had just come back and started showing flu-like symptoms. And within a couple of days, she was taken to the hospital and put on life support and passed within hours, as I understand it. So this was very precipitous, and a surprise. Natalie, I think, was the person we all aspire to be in terms of our health. She was a yoga practitioner. She was a walker. She was, ate healthy. I mean, I think she had, to the extent that I knew her, avoided many of the bad habits that many of the rest of us had. She was so this is even kind of more shocking. And what I can't even imagine Peter Harris's experience, this being so sudden, so precipitous, right on the heels of this wonderful trip that she had come back from. Anyway, so I'd like to close with the Tara mantra, if we might, for Natalie. But does anyone have anyone else they would like to recognize when we do the mantra?
I would just like, I would like to recognize my little 6-year-old nephew who is dealing with leukemia. His name is Jude.
Thank you.
And of course, Peter will be in there.
Yes. Yeah, the shock that he is experiencing is just unimaginable, unimaginable. Okay, so for those who haven't done this before, Tara mantra is a Tibetan practice, and it's invoking the feminine spirit of compassion in the universe, which is embodied in Tibetan tradition as green Tara. You may have seen pictures of green or statues of green Tara. And we repeat the mantra 108 times, hence the need for the mala beads. So I will chant, and I'll ask you to please chant with me, but turn off your sound so that we don't end up with a crazy cacophony. And so it's a little short mantra. If you don't know it, you will by the 107th time. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. 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 Thank you, everyone. Shall we do our final vows?
Yes. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.
Great. So thank you, everyone.